Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Drew English, and today's guest is Anna Andersen. Anna's a director working primarily in documentary and doc-style commercials through her production company, Nina Films. She's had a chance to work on some really cool stuff, including a few pieces in a recent partnership with Fujifilm. We talk a bunch about that, as well as her road into filmmaking and why she prioritizes making personal work. If you're new here, please follow along wherever you get your podcasts. A 5-star review would really help us out. We're also posting this to YouTube, so if you're watching there, a subscribe and a thumbs up would really help boost us along as well. I had a really great time with this conversation. I hope you do too. And without any delay, here's Anna. Anyway, it's good to see you. How are you? How have things been?
Things have been good. Just working on various projects and prepping for some film festivals for the latest film that just came out. So
thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed our conversation last time when we had a chance to catch up, and you're always good at digging up pretty incredible ideas for films. I just had a chance to finish out No Man's Land, which is really great.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is really great to kind of get the ball rolling. And as people heard from the intro, you're, a documentary filmmaker, and you're also working in commercial, primarily directing in both of those respects. But I'm always curious how people get their start. Cause for me, I didn't find filmmaking till later. I was a musician for a long, long time. So were you always one of those people who's like, filmmaking, I'm doing filmmaking, I'm going to make films, this is what I'm doing? Or did this come out of left field, and were you, going down a different path at some point?
Well, first, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
Of course. Of course.
And in terms of my start and figuring it out, no, I didn't even know it was a job. I had no idea that you could actually pursue a really creative path and make some money sustainably. No, it was totally not on my radar. And I didn't know anyone who was doing that. I grew up in, on a farm in rural Wisconsin. It was just, no one was a filmmaker. That was not a thing that people did. But I really was fascinated by the way people interact, how people work, how they think. And I originally started out studying neuroscience in school and college. And
okay, that's a bit different.
Yeah, I was pretty convinced I was either going to work in a lab or go pre-med and try to go the neuro track. That obviously didn't happen. But I think it's the core reason is why are we functioning the way we are functioning? And it's just this deep curiosity and people and how we, interact with the world and with each other.
I think that curiosity and figuring out how people work and why they work the way they do totally carries through from neuroscience and documentary filmmaking, in a professional sense. I think the curiosity totally carries over. Anyway, just my 2 cents.
No, I agree. I mean, and I think there's a lot of overlap between art and science that people don't think about. It's that curiosity and wanting to push the boundaries and come up with crazy new ideas. And that's very similar in both. And so I find a nice home, and we'll come back to this later, but direct a lot of tech commercials, which feeds my sciencey, nerdy side. And then I have more of the creative side. So that's kind of nice.
Totally. So if you were going down the almost pre-med track, so how did you even land in the world of filmmaking or even video or whatever? How did you even discover this was a thing that might be right for you?
I pursued that for a while and then decided I wanted to travel and not be in a lab. I got a scholarship to go to Costa Rica one of the summers in sophomore year and ran cross country and learned Spanish and stayed with a local. And I was wow, this is really cool. What if I did more of this? So then I started to look at other options, and I guess long story short, I took a documentary filmmaking class my last semester. And I was like, oh, this is it. This can combine all the things that I'm interested in. And so that was sort of the beginning of thinking about it. And then I moved to Spain for a year and taught English, and then came to New York to finally pursue it after that.
That's interesting. I have an old friend who did something similar in terms of wanted to travel and got a job teaching Spanish in Barcelona or Madrid. I can't remember which of the two, but she had a blast. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it's, you know, a lot of times like stuff kind of comes out of left field when you're not looking for it. In your case, it was like taking this documentary course in school. You know, similar things have happened for me where I was just like trying to find something new to do. I too took a documentary class at DCTV down in Chinatown, and that kind of like turned me on to the fact that I could actually make my own projects and like tell my own stories. So yeah, I definitely feel like the documentary kinship, because that's kind of, you know, where I started. So wait, how long have you been in New York then?
So I've been here for 7 years.
For 7 years. Okay. And you just dive right in, or were you like kind of floundering around a little bit trying to find your footing?
I'd say flounder is like a really good word for that. Yeah, it was definitely, I mean, I started out in photo. So I was doing a lot of photo for like underground music scenes and concerts and stuff. That's where it started. And that was an amazing community. That was a really great community. And that sort of started branching out. I mean, everything in film is who you know. And so like one connection to get on set and to be the PA, and then the next connection to get on set and, you know, be the BTS person, and like just kind of going up the ladder until, you know, where we are now. But
so starting in photo, like, were you doing, when you say BTS, like behind the scenes stuff, were you just doing like behind the scenes photos for things?
Yeah, I did behind the scenes photos, videos. So I like was just saying yes to kind of everything, and also definitely saying yes to things I didn't know how to do, and I would like look it up like before I'd go, you know. And I think there's sort of a level where you can, as long as you can deliver and you can do it, just getting yourself into the spot is really important, and then you'll figure it out.
Yeah, the key is always to just say yes and then figure it out later. Like, sure, I could do that, no problem. And then on the walk home, you just pull out your phone and start Googling all the things you don't know what you just said yes to. So when did you? So how long was it? Just while we're building your like backstory here, like how long was it that you were kind of taking the, you know, odd jobs, as it were? Like, you know, how long was it before you really got into like a groove, being on set regularly and kind of like being in more of a creative leadership role on set, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely bounced around in various jobs for a couple years, and I, worked at Global Citizen for a little bit. I worked at We Are Social. So I had some corporate stuff mixed in, but decided it wasn't for me. I just didn't vibe with the office life. Just couldn't swing it. And so I left that. So I probably did that for about 2 years, and then went freelance. So that was like, 4 years ago. So 3 years in. So 4 years ago. And then I was an editor first, and then DP, cinematographer for various things, and then producer, and then started directing. I had a very similar path, like getting into the film side of things, where like I started in post and then started transitioning into more like on-set roles. I'm curious what the transition into freelancing was like for you, because when I did the full transition into like filmmaking, right, as a creative profession, I was working part-time, and then there was like that distinct moment of like, okay,
this job says it's going to pay me enough money to float me for an entire summer. And we're just going to take the leap and see what happens. And there was a lot of figuring things out as I went. So I'm always curious, like when people say, then I went freelance, it's like such an easy statement, but what did the like, then I went freelance actually contain for you? You know, like what was that experience like?
Honestly, it was bumpy, you know, like I thought I had enough clients. At first, I'd been building them up as I was at my full-time job. And it definitely wasn't enough. I like ended up working in a restaurant for a while and like bartending on the side to make it all work. But there was a point where I finally was tipping the scales into making more money in the creative freelance work than I was bartending. So I just took the leap and said no to that job, which was very scary at that time because it was definitely like a cushion and a crutch that I could lean back on. But it also, you know, it takes a lot of time. It can divert you from what's really important and what you want to focus on and where your energy goes. So,
I mean, time's a killer. Mostly if you're an impatient person, which I'm classically an impatient person. So I have a hard time doing the comparison thing to other people. It's like, oh, why is this person here when I want to be there? And, it's so funny. I just talked about this in the last interview, something similar, but it's like, yeah, time is definitely a factor. And, it's the idea of like an overnight success actually takes like 10 years, no matter who you see out there, who you think is just like killing it, or they are killing it now, go back 10 years and they're probably in a very similar beginning stage that you are or were in is the idea. Plus, I mean, you're in New York. Everybody like waits tables or bartends or whatever when they're doing creative pursuits. I feel like it's a rite of passage.
It honestly was so much fun. Like it was a really good time. The people were amazing. You learn to be so gracious to your waiters, bartenders, like cooks, whoever it is. Like, man, they work so hard. They work so hard.
Well, it's interesting. And that kind of skill set that you're, maybe unknowingly developing working like in a service industry, let's say, I mean, you're really developing your empathy, right? And how you empathize with other people. And especially now that you're working in documentary, like it's all about being empathetic with your subjects in a lot of cases. So you're learning like these like life skills by living real life. It's funny how that works, So there's totally a lot of value in that. I did, tech support over the phone was my corporate job. And it's like, I'm real good on the phone with people still. Cause you figure out like the right questions to ask and also don't be a jerk. There's a way to get what you want without like, being super pushy. Yeah. So real life skills are more valuable than I used to think in a creative field. But and I will ask you after this about finding consistent clients because you seem to be very good at that. But I want to talk first about like finding your voice, right? And it's kind of a loaded question because, you would agree with this. It's like a lot of times you do jobs and gigs that, don't necessarily resonate with you as much as something else would, but like everybody's got to eat and put food on the table. In regards to personal projects, like when did you start or when did you recognize that you were starting to like develop your own voice, right? So from my point of view, just doing a little bit of catching up on like your website and things that you're putting out in the world as I was doing some research for this, it's like a lot of your passion work, your documentary work is very woman focused. You run a woman-led production company with Nilu, who we're both friends with. And your commercial work also, as you mentioned before, feeds a little bit of the like science nerd in you, which is great, where you do a lot of tech work. And I also noticed that it's like a lot of like green tech or companies that are trying to like be environmentally conscious. And these are choices that you're putting out in the world on your website that clearly like mean something to you. And you do have like this distinct voice. So I'm kind of curious, like, was that an evolution, or when you finally felt like you were rooted in filmmaking as a career, were you very intentional on like, these are the kinds of things that I want to pursue or put out into the world?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an evolution, but I think there's always something about female-focused stories. That was number one. And I think the other thing that I've found, just like things that I'm drawn to and like reflecting back on it, is I really like stories that are unexpected and like go into places that people don't get to go to. And so you're taking the audience on this journey with you, whether it's to the highlands of Guatemala to hang out with women weavers, or, you know, sailing on a boat that's completely accessible to paraplegics and quadriplegics, to lesbian separatists in the Deep South. You know, there's something I think about all of these stories when I reflect back that, yes, it's about women, and yes, it's about, I think it's really women. Women are the main focus, but then it really is like, what is unexpected? What are you not going to put together in a story that would normally go? And where can you not usually travel? What are these like hidden worlds?
Well, it's you know, just to interject for a second, it's like a vehicle, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, using women-focused stories in your passion work, again, just my opinion, is a vehicle to get to those unexpected places, specifically with like No Man's Land. Yeah. When we caught up a little while ago and you sent me the link to it, I was very curious to watch, because it's this separatist community in like, it's Alabama, right? In the deep rural wilderness of Alabama. It's a separatist community of lesbians that was set up before there were more rights than there are now. Mm-hmm. And it was just like this really unexpected, to your point, thing that, like, first of all, lesbian separatist community in today's world is different and unique. And granted, it came out of like a different time, but also in rural Alabama, of all places, like it's like just weird in the sense that you wouldn't expect it. And so that, I think, is a great example of like using women-focused stories to deliver something unexpected, which is super cool. I totally get that. In terms of passion projects, like, what's your take on the importance of passion projects? And I ask it because everybody can say they're important, right? But in like what context are they important? Are they just important to you personally because you need to create? Or is it important to you in the sense that like, yeah, you need to create, but it also gives you an opportunity to like further refine your voice? And do you find that passion projects help you on the career side of things as well?
I would say the passion projects are just what I want to do. Like, I wish I could just make my living doing the passion projects, which I'm sure everybody says that because that's why they're passionate.
Sure, yeah.
But I think in terms of finding a balance, it's very important. The commercial work will help you pay for the passion projects. So it's always this like teetering seesaw of like, what is going to take priority and when does it need to take priority? And trying to be logical about it, like what feeds your soul, but what pays your rent. So like finding that balance where you can explore refining your voice, you can explore topics and themes that are important to you and type of work you want to put out into the world and what you want to be an extension of yourself and the communities you share the story with and collaborate with. But then also finding time to make a living, and hopefully your passion projects speak loudly and get enough recognition that you will move in that direction and you will actually be able to do that in the long term.
Right. yeah, you hope that like they kind of do this and they intersect at some point, right? So I totally get that. I wish I could just do what I want to do and make a living off it all the time. So why documentary? I mean, understanding that there are these things that are important. I mean, you could just as easily, well, I don't want to say easy, but like similarly, you could tell those stories narratively by like writing stories and writing characters and casting. So what is it about documentary specifically that draws you in so much?
Because documentaries like crazy. Like people will lead these so like super unexpected lives that you could never even come up with for a narrative film. I think that's what I love about it, is just how shockingly original every person's story is. And there's no way you could write all of that. There's no way all these twists and turns could pop into your head the way they do organically in life. And I think that's what's so fascinating, is it's just happening around us. And you can find someone who seems like a normal person on the street, and they might have this absolutely incredible story about their life or what they're doing. And that's fun. That's just very cool to get to know people on that level. And I think there's a really deep connection you share when you make a film about someone. You're getting to know them in an incredibly vulnerable way. You get total access to their highest highs, their lowest lows. And sometimes they don't even share that with their own families. So you're in a very privileged position to shepherd this story along and to share it. And it's such an honor. Like, I wouldn't feel that same level of gratitude, I think, in narrative. So for me, those are the two big reasons for documentary.
I'm into all that. Where do you like find your subjects? Like, cause I'm just thinking back to No Man's Land. I'm like, wait, like, how did you even dig that up?
Yeah. So we found them. So I had a co-director, co-cinematographer, co-producer on this project, Gabrielle Canal, and we were both working at Global Citizen at the time. And I wanted to pitch doing this story on female-led communities that are specifically non-matriarchal, like a revolution in the idea and in the practice. And so they came up in our research, just a New York Times article from 2011. And we found their website that was like all different kinds of fonts, different colors. And we reached out, and it took like 6 months of us reaching out for them to finally reply. I think we just pestered them enough, and they're like, okay, you guys can come down to Alpine and we'll do like a round table, and, the whole community will be there. We'll ask you questions and see if we want to do it. And so that's how it started.
That's really cool. How long did that whole project take, by the way? Like not the post-production side, but just once the wheels were in motion, like to go down and film and all that stuff.
Since we did a crowdfunding campaign and then financed some of it ourselves. Total was probably about 2 years, and it's a 6-minute short. So yeah, and post was another year, and then festivals like another year. So 4 years total.
That's commitment.
Yeah.
That is commitment. It takes a while. The story, the Oliphant Studios story, where the daughter is not going to be taking over her mother's business. How did you find that one? I guess they're New York based, so maybe is a little bit easier, but how did that fall in your lap, or did you have to go like dig it up?
So that one's really special because Violet and I've been friends for 7 years. Like, she was one of the first people I met in New York. And I was doing a photo project after Trump got elected, highlighting different badass women that I encountered or were introduced to. And Violet was introduced to me to do the photo project. And we went to a cemetery, and I had her pour blue paint on herself. It was the first time we met. And then we were friends since then. So, it's been just a lot of years of friendship. And then Nilu and I approached them with this opportunity to work with Fujifilm and tell their story. And they said yes, since we have such a deep connection. And, I love Sarah, I love the studio, and it worked out great.
Well, it's actually a really good segue because it was this co-branded piece with Fujifilm that I've noticed you've really been able to take your documentary voice and weave it really, really well into client projects. And so, one of the things that's super impressive to me is you've been able to like bring in a client like Fujifilm, which is huge, whether you're a filmmaker or not. I mean, everybody knows who Fuji is. And you've been able to like weave in your own documentary storytelling style and voice into these like branded pieces. So it's really interesting to me that you already had this connection with Oliphant Studios, who in the photography world is super well known, and their backdrops are, if you've seen a magazine with a photo in it, you've probably seen their backdrop in one of them. I mean, they're literally everywhere. It's pretty incredible. So to not only have access to these incredible subjects, but then to also like be partnering with a big brand like Fujifilm, I think from like a filmmaker's perspective, or anybody working in media production or whatever, is kind of like an ideal scenario, like kind of like a dream scenario to be partnering with a big brand, having some budget, being able to work on really interesting subject matter. Certainly for me, I mean, that's, those are always the best projects where there's a little bit of money behind them, really interesting subject, something great for the reel. You get to say, hey, look at our client, look who our client is. It's all really, really cool. So how did Fujifilm come into the mix for you guys?
I actually got connected to Fujifilm through another friend who is a producer, and we had produced other commercials together before. And so I got on set. I met the director, Verena, who's amazing. And she just floated the idea like, hey, we're looking for projects for a new camera launch. If you have any ideas, let me know. And I was like, oh, girl, I have so many ideas. Let me tell you all my ideas. And she was really receptive. She was so supportive, was like, yes, let's set up a meeting. You should talk to Victor, who's the VP of North America. And we had our wrap dinner after the shoot, and we all went out for margaritas and tacos. And Victor was there, and she like gave me the nudge, and I pitched it on the spot over margaritas and tacos. And then the project was born.
Never a bad spot when you can pitch a project over margaritas and tacos.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. And I think it speaks to the power of like connection in the unseen way. It's like what we do, the world we roll in, is a relationship business. You meet people and you have conversations and you find people who are, I mean, it's literally like making friends. Like you just go out. If you're a social person, you just develop your social connections. And the more you do that in your world, the smaller that world becomes. And it's kind of crazy to me all the time. Every week, I have these moments of realizing just how small our creative community is. And that's just filmmaking. There's any number of like creative, professions that have a similarly small world. But I think it really speaks to the power of connection, just being like true to yourself and, allowing yourself to just have fun and meet people and live life a little bit. And you never know what's going to come out of that. So I know when we spoke offline before, you've just really enjoyed the process of working with Fujifilm in general. And they seem to like keep coming back with projects. I just watched the XT5 film that follows the girl who gets mentored by a Fujifilm photographer, and they go out to Zion. And was that something you pitched or something they came to you with, or how did that happen?
So that one, they came to me after the Oliphant piece, which was great. It was pretty much on the tail of Oliphant. So just wrapped that up and then jumped right into the next. I remember we had a meeting like the following week and they're like, okay, next camera, let's go.
That's awesome.
It was great. And I mean, I just feel so lucky to be pulled into that community because they really support filmmakers and photographers and artists. And it's so much a part of their core value set and their ethos to highlight voices that they think are important and to share stories that they think are important. And they give the opportunities to people who are very much starting out or mid-career. So they're amazing. I just can't say enough good stuff about them.
No, that's really great to hear, especially as like someone who this is a Fuji camera that I'm talking to right now. Shout out Fuji. As someone who like enjoys their gear and uses it on a daily basis, it's like always nice to know that a brand has similar values to what you hold true. And it's like, I love that they really are pushing storytelling and artist discovery and all those things. One thing we didn't touch on is that you do have your own production company with our mutual friend Nilu Amin. Mm-hmm. And just kind of curious, like how that happened. Was it just like, hey, we should, I feel like we should have a production company, or did it come together for some specific reason? I mean, I started my company because I needed a business bank account. I mean, that's literally all it was. And it's turned into something else entirely, but I just needed like a separate checking account, which is just so dumb. But anyway, so how did that all come together?
I mean, we were both kind of going after the same clients. And as we were like talking through it, we met at Masters in Motion and just realized we lived literally across the street from one another in Brooklyn. Oh, hey, we should hang out. And just as we started talking about our work, what we do, what we're interested in, we both were like, oh, we are interested in exactly the same things. And we have the same like 5-year plan, where we want to go and what we want to do. And we just decided it's better to do it together than to do it alone. And Nina Films was born.
Where'd the name come from?
So we want to come up with a cooler story. I'll tell you the real story, but we're figuring out our like cool story. So Nina, who is Nina? It is Anna and Nilu. Nina, Nilu, Anna. It's cute. It's cute.
That makes sense. It's like, there's no fighting for who gets top billing. It's just all in the name together.
All together. Very equal.
Anyway, I think that's actually a really interesting reason to form a company, to form a partnership, because most creative industries, and ours is no exception, is ultra competitive, right? And not in like a nasty way necessarily. It's just like everybody wants to be doing the fun and interesting jobs, right? So it just goes without saying that things would be competitive. Getting jobs would be competitive, especially in a freelance capacity where you're trying to like pitch clients, whatever. And so making that decision to like say, well, we get along really well and we want the exact same things. And so why should we be competing with each other when we can just, combine our forces basically and maybe get there faster together? I think is really a great example of setting ego aside, which is something that's also huge in our industry, mm-hmm. and really kind of like working towards the greater good, for lack of a better term. Do you have any trick or any kind of thing that you found helps you in terms of finding consistency in client work? You guys seem to be working pretty regularly and always churning out projects. So any tricks or advice or Or are you just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks?
Honestly, it's two things. At first, to get clients, Neely went to, we've both gone to a ton of networking events where you just meet people. This industry is all relationships, as we were saying. So you need to meet people somehow in some way.
I am the worst, most awkward person at networking events. It makes me cringe just thinking about it. Anyway, side note, maybe that's why I struggle with it a little bit, because I'm so bad at just hey, this is what I do.
It's so awkward. It's so awkward. Everyone knows it's awkward, but trying to work it in a casual way is always the least awkward way to do it. For example, with the Fujifilm project, I got on because of a producer I knew, so you just never know where the path is going to go. It could lead to so many other places and open doors for you that you wouldn't expect. But then the other thing I think for consistent clients is delivering really great work and just keeping them happy, have a great relationship with them, make them feel, that sounds so weird, but safe and taken care of, but make sure they want to keep coming back to you. Don't give them a reason to go somewhere else.
To go a level deeper, it's sure, everybody wants to deliver great work and keep their clients happy. But it's when you start to peel back the layers, just as someone who's been in the same position, okay, client jobs, delivery, let's keep them happy and blah, blah, blah. And things get a little hairy just in terms of time you're spending on that specific project versus trying to find new jobs and things like that. I guess my question is one of balance, right? You were working so hard to deliver a great product and keep a client happy that you wind up running yourself into the ground, and every other aspect of life kind of falls away. So, do you have anything any system or whatever? And I use the word system loosely, it doesn't need to be a bullet pointed list, but just something that helps you kind of deliver consistently, but also not lose your mind in the process. You seem very well adjusted. So
that's great that I see. That's awesome. Yeah, I think I also have the tendency to just not have boundaries. I will keep working, as I'm sure many people do in our industry, where you just say, okay, I can do that. I don't need a weekend again. That's fine. I love working. It's great. But I think also on the other side, setting up expectations at the very beginning with the client. You get X number of edits. You get, this many days of production. Otherwise it's extra. This is the breakdown of everything. So just being really transparent from the beginning, because I used to not do that. And then the clients who pay the least want the most, essentially. And so it's just setting boundaries with yourself, setting boundaries with them, because then it's clear and everyone knows what to expect. And you're going to deliver something great, but not at the detriment of your own sanity.
Well, and I think that's right at the crux of it is just that level of transparency with yourself and with your client. I've made the mistake of not getting contracts for things, not talking about money up front, which is never fun to try and backpedal and have a money conversation once you're down the road with something.
No.
And you live and learn, and it's the two things I live and breathe by when it comes to client jobs are always have a contract that outlines exactly what you talked about, production days, post days, number of rounds of edits, any of that stuff, put it in writing. And also years and years ago, I made it a point, and I've stuck to it, to not be awkward about talking about money and budgets and all that stuff upfront and very clearly with a client, because, you're working to get paid, even if you like what you're doing. It's everybody's got to work to survive. And, a client knows that they have a budget to work with. So it's get that conversation out in the open.
Absolutely.
It pays unbelievable amounts of dividends to just get all that stuff sorted up front. So you're not pulling your hair out at the end. When people want a million changes and you're not getting paid for it.
Yes. And I've definitely been in that boat and have learned from that. And wow, just after, getting head over the head with do a contract, eventually you start to build in all those things and ask for that. And I think as creatives, we're also sort of made to feel guilty for asking for money. People are like, oh, you should just do this because you love it and it's fun. And so don't ask for money. But where does that come from? Of course.
Yeah, I don't know. I just read something recently. I'm trying to remember where it was. When you do something creative for a living, like somewhere along the line, it's like drilled into us that we should be thankful to be making what would be considered art for a living, so that we shouldn't. It was in the context of like undervaluing creative professions, but it's along the same lines, right? It's like somewhere in the cultural conversation, creative professionalism became undervalued, or creators were made to feel like it was a privilege in and of itself to just create, so that we didn't need to get paid what we were actually worth or whatever it was. Yeah. But I mean, it's a very similar sentiment,
Yeah. And it's all bogus. Like if you're working for a commercial client, ask for the money. Ask for a lot of money, because that's what you deserve to get paid for your years, your knowledge, your dedication. I think it needs to be like a thought revolution around creative professionals.
Well, also the idea of putting a value on experience and not a value on time. And this is like a big thing for me, where I'm like kind of obsessed with the idea of trading time for money. And I'm trying to figure out how to like trade less time for more money. I mean, it's important to start to shift the mindset into you're charging for your experience. You're charging for the 10 or 20 or whatever, however many years of life and work that you've lived up to that point, that you've made your mistakes and learned from those mistakes and built systems and processes for yourself that makes the product that you're delivering now better than it would have been prior, right? So the whole concept of like placing a dollar value valuing experience, valuing experience over time is something I'm like super obsessed with lately.
I mean, that's everything. And it's also valuing your voice and giving that part of, the dollar amount, whatever budget you have allotted and you're asking for. It's 1,000% your experience, your lived experience, your perspective, your voice, all of that counts and is important.
You've developed your own creative voice, right? You clearly have like this little pouch of ideas that you just like reach in and, pluck one out. And it seems like, and you can absolutely tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you do a decent amount of, let's call it ideation, right? Where whether it's you're specifically blocking out time in your calendar to sit down and like try and brainstorm some ideas for projects, or it's you just always have a little notebook or an app on your phone ready to go. So if you're on the subway or walking around and something strikes, you write it down. I am very curious about your process for like ideation, just having these concepts going in the background. So I'm curious about your how you handle ideation and like how you kind of like consistently come up with ideas, and how do you like kind of log them and keep them fresh for, whenever they might come up.
I feel like, so whenever I have downtime, I just get like swarmed with ideas. It's almost like overwhelming, like what you want to pursue. Yeah. But for me, I keep an app on my phone, and it's just in the Notes app. I have like a running list of different thoughts, ideas. But basically it can be kind of anything that's interesting out there, I'm curious about. And I'd also say for people just starting out, tap your own community too. Cause like the Oliphant story came from a dear friend, and the upcoming boat documentary, that was also connected through a family friend. So you can find in your own network these incredible stories, and you don't need to go super outside the box like I did with No Man's Land. There are 2 ways to do it. It's just having conversations. What's intriguing to you? And can you find a story in it? Is there something that's worth saying by pursuing it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really great advice. You know, you only have to maybe dig a little level deeper in the world you already exist in, to find stories worth telling, which is really cool. And just, you know, just setting aside some time or making sure you're ready to go when those inspiring ideas strike, I mean, really goes a long way. Just being ready for inspiration is key. And like, maybe, you know, I'm the type of person where I have to like make things a habit. Yeah. So trying to like create a habit for yourself in that regard is helpful. If I asked you to list me off 5 or 6 ideas, I'm sure you could, of like projects you are thinking about or ideas you're thinking about building out, which is really cool and really inspiring. And it's, I think, an important lesson to just like be ready for when the inspiration comes, when it like bestows itself on you.
But it does feel that way, where you're like, I'm a vessel and it is channeling through me. Like I am not in control. But I also like, I make a crazy amount of pitch decks. Shout out to Canva because it's great. But get sponsorship. Hey Canva. But I'm constantly making pitch decks. I don't know if they're going to get picked up, but if they get an opportunity to be presented, I have like 4 ready to go with fleshed out ideas, visuals, look, feel, aesthetic, all of that. And I just churn them out. I just like to make them because it helps me see it, because I'm weird and just need the visual cues, and I can like organize my thoughts, and it's just too messy in here, so it needs to go somewhere else.
I totally get that. Getting ideas somewhat organized, maybe to the degree that you're doing it, or just a quick outline. I mean, it's so important because, you know, life is busy, and like, I feel like there's always more and more things to be distracted by, especially on your phone. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's really important to get those ideas as built out as you can. Are you like making time for like scheduling time for deck creation, or are you just like sitting at home, putting Netflix on in the background and like working on your pitch deck?
Yeah, mostly that. Like
mostly that.
It's like chill time for me, which is, you know, I relax organizing my thoughts and making pitch decks. That is so not for everybody, and not what I would recommend unless that's your jam. But it's, you know, it's like setting routine. Maybe it's carving out 30 minutes every morning or every evening to just jot down, just like ideate, word vomit onto the page of what happened in your day. What's interesting? What ideas are intriguing you? Is there a cool article you read? Is there a person you just met? Like, it can be anything.
Yeah. I mean, a popular one I tried doing, and I was really bad at like being consistent with it, is morning pages that came out of the Artist's Way, which is like, the idea is it's like, what is it? It's like 3 handwritten pages first thing in the morning before you do anything else. And it's just like stream of consciousness. Yep. I you know, it's a very successful exercise for lots of people. I was horribly bad at doing it consistently. So don't go on my experience.
I think everyone's different. Like if you love routine, that probably works great for you. And I'm so jealous. I am so terrible with routine. Like I find like, I don't know, I love the chaos. I thrive in it. I'm like, nothing is the same every day. And that's where I feel comfortable. So that's good and bad. But in terms of like creating and ideating, it's just random for me. Whenever inspiration strikes, or I'm sitting down and want to make a pitch deck.
Oh my God, you're so perfectly disposed for being a documentarian. Nothing makes sense and it's chaos all the time. Yeah, that's perfectly suited for you. So before we wind this thing down, what's coming up next for you or for the company or anything on the horizon that you want to share or talk about?
The Promise of Spring is having an East Coast premiere at the Angelica, which is amazing. Just really honored to be playing there. But it'll be May 4th at 6:30 p.m. We're in the New York Shorts section, and then there's, lots of great features after. So we're all going to be there, both Nilo and I, a bunch of friends. So we hope people come out, celebrate art, family, and film and independent filmmaking.
Right on. That's awesome. And then, so if people want to learn more about what you're up to, or they want to find you online, where can they dig you up?
So if people want to follow us, they can follow Hey Nina Films, which is Nilu and myself. And if they just want to give me a follow, I'm Anna Louise Imagery. So either way is good. And both of the websites are pretty much the same.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put all that in the show notes. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this, Anna. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun. And just chat with you. You make it so easy.
Oh, thanks so much. All right. Well, thanks for being here.
Bye.
All right, folks, there you have it. That was my interview with director Anna Andersen. I'll be sure to post the links she mentioned, as well as a couple of others in the show notes for this episode. Speaking of, if you want to find out more about the show, you can find us online at nosetpath.com or on Instagram at nosetpathpodcast. And if you want to learn more about me, you can find me at drewenglish.com or on Instagram at drewenglish with 2 H's at the end. Thanks again for being here and tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.